the Cincinnati native, not a far drive home. Much further for Davis.
Perhaps a treacherous drive, however.
Yeah. Jim going to send his hand back very quickly. Did not like what he saw.
I do not know if there was blue mana in his hand. Kind of the starting point here.
Either way, he thought it stunk, so he sent it back. We'll see if Ben likes what he's got.
So a lot to like in Jim's deck here for the matchup. 4 copies of Daze, 3 copies of Force of Will, 3 copies of Stifle, 3 copies of Spell Pierce, and a good clock. Good foundation for a matchup against Storm. There is a little bit of dead weight game 1, Abrupt Decay, which is pretty close to dead. Disfigure, which actually is. Some of the creatures are a little bit on the slow side, but this is a good place to be. A lot of these Delver decks I see of all swaths seem to kind of concede game 1 or expect Force of Will to get the job done, and then have a lot of hate in the sideboard. But Jim is prepared for the first game as well as the post-board games.
Patrick, I've been informed on Twitter that now that is what I call music. Number 53 is out.
Okay. Is that related to something? Or is that just a random factoid?
Someone on Twitter just felt that it was necessary for us to know.
Okay.
You gonna be picking that up?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm not.
Okay. Does that mean that we're old since there are 53 of these?
Yes. Also, that's what I call music is not what you call music is not necessarily what I call music. That's where that CD really breaks down. Really, that title presumes a lot about our shared definitions of music.
It does. It does.
So no, I will not be purchasing it.
53 of those is quite a few.
I think they probably crank out several a year.
There's potential for that.
Because if I was working on that brand, what I would want to do is, all right, it's been 3 or 4 months. There's been some pop songs and some radio singles that have been popular. Crank out a CD featuring them before those songs are no longer popular. Rinse, repeat. Now that's what I call music.
That's what I call a good business model.
That's what
I call that. They wouldn't have 53 of them on accident.
No, someone's buying them.
Jim does not look like he likes his hand.
Well, it's 2 Wastelands and 2 Force of Wills, so this is kind of one of those excruciating hands where it's almost good enough. If one of those Wastelands is a blue source of mana, the hand's perfect. But instead, it's a 5-card hand.
He's going back to the drawing board yet again. Looks like Ben's going to keep his. We're being informed that now that's what I call music started in '99.
So that's 16 years, and there's what 50 some odd volumes.
Yeah.
So that's about one every 3 or 4 months.
That doesn't include the Christmas ones, however.
Yeah, which you got to crank those out too, because around Christmas time people will buy anything.
They really will. Again, now that's what I call a good business model.
Right.
That is just smart.
Right. My version would just be Mariah Carey's All I Want for Christmas Is You 12 times. But I'm sure you can come up with a reasonable album.
I think that would sell well every year.
Right. I think that's an easy sell.
So perhaps we should not talk about this anymore and get in the lab.
I know. Every time I talk on air about this sort of stuff, I start thinking in my own head, I should just shut up because I'm giving away the goods.
You began with the monster truck analysis earlier today. And now that's what Patrick calls music. What if you just had your name in it?
That's
just
what
like
Patrick
that.
calls music.
Now that's what Patrick calls music.
Yep.
Boom. Like hotcakes.
Exactly. I would just be releasing other band CDs that I liked under the name. That's what Patrick calls music. Which is
probably fine.
Perhaps illegal. I'm not an expert on copyright and trademark law. Look into it.
Jim with 5 cards.
It's like it's got Lance and a Daze.
Yes.
Imagine he's hard pressed to go to 4 on this.
This is a very reluctant keep. And does he have a Death Rider or Delver? Nope, just a Flooded Strand and a pass. Ben will draw an island, and the finals is underway here from Indianapolis. He'll start by playing that island, and here's a Gataxian Probe. Jim's going to have to show off the goods here in just a second. Tarmogoyf Daze, Wasteland 2. Also a Spell Pierce there, so it's not the worst hand I've ever seen.
I mean, for 5 cards, you're not going to do a whole lot better.
Yeah. But Ben knows when he needs to play around now, so the probe is done resolving and a passing of the turn. Davis will draw. Another Daze. He'll sacrifice Flooded Strand.
And now, Jim's going to deploy the Tarmogoyf, and hopefully his draw steps cooperate. And if not, it's Goyf plus Spell Pierce plus Daze, which is asking a lot to beat Storm. And given his mana situation, his black cards are cut off, which is not good news either.
There's not a lot of good news here for Jim. But he's got a Tarmogoyf, and that's a clock.
Yep.
And that's really better than nothing right now. Pluto Delta's going to search Ben up a swamp.
And this may be one of those spots where Ben says, all right, he's got a 1-turn window to have drawn Force of Will. Instead, it looks like he's just playing around Stifle.
Scalding Tar in the draw.
Not the worst draw for Jim, as now that second Daze in his hand is functional.
There is a Tarn. If he can just get that Tarmogoyf up to like a 3-power creature.
Yeah, right now the clock's pretty slow.
There's a Tarn for a Wienburg. We're going back Jim's way. Jim will take a draw. A sorcery would be very, excuse me, an instant actually. There's a Gitaxian Probe already in the graveyard, but an instant would be very helpful.
Particularly Brainstorm, as there's no cost really to Jim, as he can still hold up 2 Dazes plus the Spell Pierce.
Yep. Follow up another Goyf perhaps? Yes. Back Ben's way. Ben not doing much of anything right now.
Just making land drops, but that's not necessarily a bad thing when your opponent's holding up a bunch of soft counter spells.
Another Stifle.
And that's another card that, Ben really can't win in the face of. He's got to get it out of the hand.
Coming on in. Ben down to 9. And Ben's hand is, it's okay. I think he just drew another land. Yeah, Tropical Island. Got 2 Dark Rituals of Past and Flames over there.
Stifle's especially bad news here for Ben. Because Ben's already in a position where he's going to have to, leave up mana, slog through things, or use a discard spell, and Stifle's, going to tax that even further.
Looks like Ben kept a pretty reasonable hand and has drawn quite poorly. No cantrips either. Jim draws another Tarmogoyf.
Yeah, these decks can be pretty high variance affairs, and the Ponders, the Gitaxian Probes, the Brainstorms, they're supposed to be smoothing out the rough edges, but when you don't draw them, the games can look like this.
Yeah, Wasteland's going to go after Tropical Island. There that goes. Beatdowns. Down to 5. Jim passes. Ben draws. Preordain. Ponder.
Yeah,
all the same, really.
He could have cast a Goyf to get exactly the lethal, but knocking Ben down to 5 means that Ben can't crack a fetch land or cast an instant unless he's winning that turn, which is pretty close to a kill.
Ponder's resolving. 3 cards coming.
Remember, no instance this turn for Ben unless he can win the game.
And Ben will sacrifice that Scalding Tarn down to 4.
And because he's on so many fetch lands, he really doesn't have a choice but to say, gotta go for it this turn.
Yep. See if Jim wants to stifle here. It's always an interesting situation if you're supposed to stifle this or just say, I'll wait for the Storm card and get you that way. Wienburg going to sacrifice the Scalding Tarn.
Going after the land here pairs pretty well with the Spell Pierces and the Dazes that Jim has access to. I think it's close what you want to do here, but given the nature of Jim's hand, I don't mind going after some mana.
Ben going to search up an Underground Sea. Battle. That's a card that kind of messes some things up here.
Yep.
There's a Ponder.
Curious here, where does Jim say stop?
And that's the big question.
Because this Ponder might have to resolve from Ben's side of the table, or it could be a trap.
That's what makes playing against Storm so tough.
I think Brainstorm here, Jim would really have to consider, as it's potentially 3 fresh cards.
Ponder not the exact same.
Yeah, exactly. He's getting a maximum of 1 of the cards in question.
What's tough here is too, Ben's dead next turn.
Yeah.
You know, so you got to get it right here. When he's got a Spell Pierce and 2 Dazes, that's what's in Jim's hand, is how do you use these spells? Ben has 4 cards in his hand. And Jim hasn't got to see any of them. Jim's going to sacrifice a Scalding Tarn.
And Ben saying, hold on, might respond to the fetch land here. It's an opportunity for him to resolve an instant without fear of Spell Pierce.
And the instant he can resolve is Dark Ritual. This is a good play because he can use Dark Ritual as just a way to gain mana to play over the top of these Dazes and Spell Pierce. It's a smart play.
Yep. And now there's not a lot to be gained by dazing here, as Ben can simply sacrifice the Polluted Delta and pay 1 mana, get the Ritual to resolve. So once we get to this stage, I feel like Jim almost has to allow the Ponder to resolve.
First place with 22 points.
Yeah, that's tough now.
Steven Speck. In second place with 21 points. Jacob
Another Dark
Kessler.
Ritual.
Yeah, so we're just sorting out the stack here.
Yep.
21 points. Nick Hanna.
And what a crazy stack it is.
Jacob Ross. In fifth place with 19 points. David Long.
Ponder's the one started it all.
In sixth place with
In response, Scalding Tarn was cracked. In response to that, cast Dark Ritual to get some mana to be able to pay for those taxing counter spells. Jim attempted to daze, and Ben said, well, I'll Dark Ritual in response to that. So a lot of spells have been cast this turn.
And that fetch land's still on the stack, so Jim cannot Spell Pierce, nor can he daze right now.
And you see them that they're counting up the spells that have been cast too. So Dark Ritual is going to resolve. Ben has 3 black. Days he'll pay for. So down to 2, up to 5.
If you have made the top 8 of this event, you
Now,
will be your
Jim will get the search.
at the left of
So
the
5 black here for
stage.
Ben.
You'll be your head at the left of the stage. Yeah.
And now Jim's counter spells in hand can really only trade with mana. They're not going to be able to resolve unless Ben tries to get something very expensive. Still don't know if Ben even has the kill, though. This Ponder might just be on the hunt.
Yeah, it could just be bad.
If we do not have tax information on file with you yet, you will
Because
not
Ben right
be
now in his hand
able
has a
to
Pass in Flames. We
your
know that.
prize
A mystery card hanging out, and a Ponder that I actually think has to do something. And Jim is trying to figure out, what am I supposed to do? Because he's got a Spell Pierce and a Daze in his hand. And he's got to win next turn.
You're going to meet over here in the middle of...
Is he helping Ben get to the storm count he's looking for? There's Spell Pierce on the Ponder. Ben says, I'll pay 2 black. I don't care. Down to 3. That's spell 8. There's the days.
Yeah, this is an effort in the event that Ben has to Past in Flames that he has 0 mana floating when it happens.
Yep. Pays that too. Storm count 9. 2 black. So Jim right now is defenseless. Ben Wienburg has 2 black mana in the mana pool.
And this is just boom bust right now for Ben. He's dead next turn, so there's no setup that goes from here.
Shuffling.
Yep.
I think it's a Cabal Ritual. See, Jim, I think it's a Cabal Ritual or maybe a Dark Ritual that gets him into this. But all Jim can do shows the 2 lands. Lethal Tarmogoyf's Hope. There's a mystery card coming. See what it is. Cabal Therapy, I believe. He'll take a look at the bin for the Past in Flames in hand. Volcanic Island still in the deck. But I don't think there's any way out.
He's got
Lotus Petal. Yeah, he's short 1.
Yep. Yeah, he can't get the engine started. He can cast Past in Flames, but he can't generate any mana from there. It's dead end, and Jim gets game 1.
Jim Davis does win game 1 here over Ben Wienburg. Salty Delver up a game over Storm. Heck of a game 1 there. And a big W there for Jim on a mulligan to 5.
Yep, but he mulliganed very aggressively there. Did not keep a hand or just, a couple Force of Wills and the inability to cast anything. Was able to mulligan to a hand of Tarmogoyf, 2 lands, Daze and Spell Pierce. Pretty ideal 5-card hand, and that was just enough to hold off Ben.
Not kidding, just enough is correct. As we take a look at the sideboards here, we're going to start with Ben Wienburg. He's got 3 Surgical Extractions, 2 Defense Grids, 2 Dark Confidants, 2 Abrupt Decays, 2 Chain of Vapors, 2 Pyroblasts, an Empty the Warrens, and a Massacre. What do we like and why?
I'm pretty neutral on most of these cards here just because Jim comes from so many different angles. I don't know if you can really bring in the Dark Confidants here. Jim may keep in a little bit of removal, but Confidant could potentially be good. I think that the copies of Defense Crit are okay, good but not great because Jim has discard. I think the one Empty the Warrens is nice here. It's something that Ben can win from without having to have as many resources as is required for Tendrils, and Jim doesn't have a big way to punish him.
Other side of things for Davis, lots of 1s and 2s. Grafdigger's Cage, Pay the Needle, Abrupt Decay, 2 Diverts, a Flusterstorm, a Force of Will, Murderous Cut, a Surgical Extraction, 1 Vanillion Click, 1 Maelstrom Pulse, 2 Marsh Casualties, a card that played a big role for him in his last match against Elves, then 2 copies of Thoughtseize, a card I think is going to play a pretty big role for him in this match.
Great sideboard here, 2 copies of Thoughtseize, a Vanillion Click, a Surgical Extraction, a Force of Will, a Flusterstorm, and a Grafdigger's Cage, all big improvements, and Jim gets to cut a lot of creature removal in Abrupt Decay and Disfigure to make room for it.
And those are the options for the players. They'll both look everything over before submitting their decks. And while we wait, we'll talk about Winter Regionals because it's next weekend. The Open Series is going to go on hiatus, but there's still plenty of Magic to be played. 14 great locations.
Yeah, venues posted here next Saturday. A lot of cash prizes on the line, a lot of Open Series points. You can see the venues right here. You can always go to the website for more information at starcgames.com/regionals. And remember, the first 200 people to register will receive this free playmat.
Squirrel Confidant, Acorn Mystic, Squirrel Storm, and Force Squirrel all together on one playmat. We like to call it Squirrel Deathblade here in the booth. It's free and exclusive to the first 200 players at each regional location. Plant your flag next weekend, February 7th, StarCityGames.com/regionals for more information. As Davis and Wienburg do get ready for game number 2. Jim with some tough mulligans, but they worked out, and now he's one game away from that trophy. Trophy, that's been eluding him for some time.
I think there's a lot of players who would have kept his 6-card hand. 2 Wastelands, 2 Force of Wills, 2 blue cards. And just hope that was good enough. That he would draw blue mana soon enough to deploy a Delver and take it from there. But Jim realized he needs pressure on top of counter spells and mulliganed into a 5-card hand that had both.
Just mulligan, baby. I love mulliganing. Sometimes you just got aggressively mulligan. Send it back.
especially in this matchup where, you don't have a lot of time to draw out.
Yes. Send it back. Find the goods. That's what I recommend.
Took a lot of discipline. I think again, a lot of players would have kept that 6.
But it worked out for him. Up a game. Maybe dodged a few bullets. And, I think most importantly, I think he used those counter spells correctly.
Yep. I mean, the only question there is the stifle. That's the only one where it's, are you supposed to just deny mana in that spot to pair with your dazes and your spell pierce? Or are you supposed to hold it and assume that he can't go over the top of your counter spells, plus get that card out of your hand for the tendrils? But Jim looked pretty good, stifled a land, and then Ben was exactly 1 mana short of being able to go off that turn.
Jim has got the 2 next to his name right now, but it will be a 1 at the conclusion of this tournament. At the very least, he's walking away with 20 Open Series points. He's got the lead over Ross Merriam and Joe Lissette. It could be bigger, though.
Oh, absolutely. And up a game here. Solid matchup, good sideboard. Jim's in a great position.
And you think about the results from Season 1 so far this year. Columbus, Week 1, Joe Lissette gets it done with White Blue Heroic. Really puts himself in the lead and in the thick of things for Season 1. Dale Ayers played spoiler for Ross Merriam in the finals of Philadelphia. His Kurt Apes beat Ross playing Storm. And then DC Fabiano, even though he's a little bit behind, he could work his way into the conversation as well.
It's going to be tough, especially now with Jim. I mean, this is a huge boost. But there's a lot left to be played. And on top of that, it's not just the Season 1 implications.
Yeah, those at-large bids at the end. 7 of them this year, as Brad Nelson will be headed back to the Players' Championship. He's our first player qualified. Champion's going to try to defend his crown that he earned just a few weeks ago, oddly enough.
2 buys as well. I mean, that's a big deal here just for the opens.
Yeah. Both these decks look like they might be the top decks of the format, too. I was really surprised by Storm's performance this weekend. Win or lose the tournament for Ben. 8 copies into day 2 of 126 players. I really expected a huge decline of this deck.
Me too, and it's compelling to watch Ben on camera, who's been able to work his way around a bunch of counter spells. Almost did that game too, on a 6-card hand that really didn't shake out that well for him. Because you get so many free wins with this deck over the course of the tournament. You just run into decks like Elves or Burn, and occasional decks like Jund, Goblins, where they're just not interacting with you. And a lot of those matches you just kind of get for free. And if the deck is also reasonable, at least against the Force of Will decks of the format, which are typically deemed to be the bad matches for Storm, well then, I mean, you would need a really good reason not to play this deck.
Both players going to take a look at opening 7. Wienburg will be on the play.
And you just look at up and down this deck list, it's a list of truly unfair Magic cards.
Ben gonna mulligan his 5-land hand. Did not like it one bit. We'll see if Jim likes his. He has at least a Force of Will over there. Looks like a Delver too. Deathrite Shaman.
1 lander, but it's a clock and a Force of Will. Looks like a keeper to me.
Especially when opponent's mulliganing. Seems hard to pass up.
Agreed.
It's not impossible, but it does seem tough. Jim gonna give it a long look though. Yeah, it looks like he will keep it.
Well, the other thing about this is you definitely don't want to give away too much about your hand. And when you drop up your 7 and you say, I'll keep immediately, give some indicator about what's going on in your hand.
Yeah.
And it's bad to do in general, and particularly against a deck with Cabal Therapy. So it's always worth contemplating.
When you have the nuts, do you keep quickly or do you keep very slowly?
I try to have the same pace no matter what.
Okay.
I used to over-exaggerate, that whole act weak when you're strong, act strong when you're weak stuff, but past that now.
All grown up.
Amateur hour.
Yeah. Ben looking at 6. Giving it a long look. Jim waiting patiently, 1 game away from his first Open Series title.
A solid but not perfect opening 7 for Jim. And Ben looking at either what appears to be a sketchy 6 or go into 5 here.
Go into 5. That's tough for Storm to win on mulligans to 5. It's not impossible, of course, but he's also playing against a deck that has good clock, discard, counter spells too.
Yeah, Jim's hand's very solid against 5 cards.
Yeah.
Was fine against 7. It's very good now.
Yeah.
What's your take? Do you take a while thinking about your hands when they're in the nuts, or you just snap them off?
I snap off all hands.
Snap off all hands.
If my hand's the nuts, I keep it quickly. If my hand's trash, I'm mulligan quickly. But I also think that if you're looking at a hand for a long time, as Ben is snapping off another mulligan, I think if you look at a hand for a long time, you're trying to convince yourself to keep a bad hand, because you know what hands are good and bad in your deck. So I think, like, if you're looking at a hand that's like, I could draw, like, I think when people look at their hands for a long time, I think they're looking at and thinking about all the things they could draw that makes their hand functional, and they're never looking at the cards that they could not draw. It's like, well, if I peel a land, my hand's awesome.
Right, I think that comes up. For me, when I'm contemplating those kind of hands is in scenarios where I'm thinking to myself, okay, this hand's really bad against duress, let's say. How good is my average 6-card hand against duress versus how awesome is the 7-card hand if they don't have duress?
Sure.
And sometimes I'm kind of going through the permutations like that.
I think, like, my opinion is if you're well practiced, like, you know what hands are good in your deck and what cards are, or what hands are bad in your deck and in the matchups. And, you know, if you look at a hand and it's like, ooh, hello, how about a little land off the top of my Dark Confident, or whatever, it's like, how about you just mulligan? I find that to be probably the better idea. Here's a Gataxian Probe. So I mulligan and keep my hands relatively quickly. A Deathrite, a Delver, a Tarmogoyf, a Force of Will, a Spell Pierce, a Scalding Tarn. It's a delight over here for Jim Davis.
It's a real hand.
It's an uphill climb here for Ben Wienburg.
So Ben going to do some recording here.
This is not what he wanted to see staring back at him.
Is that Spell Pierce as well?
I believe so.
Whew. That's a hand.
Jim's saying, if you want to make me discard, feel free.
He has Cabal Therapy.
Yep, it's 2 Delvers in hand, so.
You can name Force of Will, but on a 4-card hand, he's probably not that close to winning.
Yep.
So he can name Delver of Secrets, but then he's got to still beat Tarmogoyf, Deathrite Shaman, Spell Pierce, and Force of Will.
And whatever Jim draws.
Exactly. You know, the therapy's okay for Ben to have here, but both cards are a little problematic. Both names are a little troubled. And then, you know, at this point, Ben's very light on resources. You can see him shuffling just 2 cards around in his hand.
Yeah, it's a tough name here.
And it looks like Ben's just on the plan to give himself a little bit more time. He's nowhere near being able to win anyway, so I guess he has to bank on another discard spell coming.
There's Tarn. We'll see a Deathrite Shaman here in just a second. As Therapy took care of the Delvers. Jim going to consult his hand. See which land he wants to search up. Option, of course, between Underground Sea and Tropical Island. There's the sea.
Yeah, if he doesn't draw another land and he uses Deathrite Shaman to put Tarmogoyf into play, then he's without green mana until he draws something.
There's Deathrite and a passing of the turn. Wienburg will draw a Polluted Delta. He's got a Ponder and a Lotus Petal over there. Those are the 2 cards. He'll start with a Ponder. Take a look at 3. It'll have to be a really good one, but he'll keep it. Looks like it was a copy of Dark Ritual.
Got to be a starting point, you know. One of the higher impact cards in the deck.
Davis will draw. Picked up a land, Underground Sea. Not a bad starting point.
Yep, you can deploy Tarmogoyf and leave up Spell Pierce if he's feeling so inclined, or deploy a second Deathrite Shaman.
There's the Goyf. There's the Shaman. There are the clocks. It's time to get to business.
And I like this a lot from Jim. You know, you're not going to get killed at this point with 2 cards in Ben's hand drawing to 3 with Force of Will left over. So don't hold up Spell Pierce. Just get another threat into play.
The Tarmogoyf die shows us that Goyf is a 3/4 creature.
Yeah, it's just
And
creature sorcery.
Oh, no land just yet, as Jim had to remove a land. It will be soon enough. Now it's a 3/4. There's a defense grid. See if Jim wants to fight over this.
I suspect that he won't, because Ben is on a mulligan to 4, as we've mentioned. So he's pretty light on resources. Jim's also in a position where he can leave up 3 mana, now that there's 3 mana available, with the Force of Will, and counter a substantial card from Ben. So I think Jim is best served letting this go. The upshot of countering it right now is you just put an instant and an artifact in the graveyard, and then you are on a very fast clock.
So that's kind of why I want to do it is, and I understand both sides. You know, you can really turn up the heat, turn Tarmogoyf up to, as you mentioned, a 5-power creature. You put an instant artifact in the graveyard, and then you got 2 Deathrite Shamans going to work too. And maybe it's unnecessary because Ben doesn't really have much of anything.
There are 3, you know, Ben gets a draw step next turn. There are 3 card combinations where Ben could conceivably go off.
Yeah.
So I think it's very aggressive to use the Force of Will. The incentive to me is just speeding up the clock so fast that Ben might just get pushed out of the game before he can recover.
Jim is deciding he's going to let this resolve. All right, it's in. We go back Davis's way. Take a draw step.
The thing is, Jim's clock is already still super fast.
Yeah.
Because he's got the Tarmogoyf and 2 Deathrite Shamans that can start eating redundant sorceries. So he doesn't have to go to this extreme measure to make sure that he kills Ben quickly.
There's the attack for 3. 3rd land there, pretty nice as well. Don't think Jim wants to draw any more lands, but a 3rd land there, pretty nice. So he can Force of Will and then pay 3 mana for defense grid. Looks like Lotus Petal was the draw here for Wienburg. And Jim gonna activate Deathrite. Gonna remove 2 sorcerers from the graveyard so the Tarmogoyf still stays large. So there goes Cabal Therapy and a Taxing Probe. Down to 10 is Wienburg. Jim will draw. Another Force of Will. Doesn't help too much.
Well, it's not. Oh, yeah. I suppose he can't pay through 2 defense grids.
Yeah.
So.
Jim deciding how he should attack here. Should I attack with just my Tarmogoyf? Am I getting in with Deathrite Shaman in any capacity? The goal here is he can't win this game, but he wants to make it a 2-turn clock no matter what.
Yeah, and I think this is the easiest thing to do is just attack for 5, leave Force of Will, say go. Don't get in a position where you have to use your mana doing something and then you're unable to activate the Deathrite Shaman.
Here's Dark Ritual. This is Ben's last hurrah. Lotus Petal, defense grid, pass the turn. That is going to do it. It's been a long time coming for the Long Island native, but Jim Davis is your Star City Games Standard Open champion here in Indianapolis, Indiana.
Very well deserved, and in the first week with Treasure Cruise, no longer legal for a big tournament. Naturally, the black cards of the format back in full swing. Not surprising to see Deathrite Shaman, a huge factor in the winning deck.
The